Hello, 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 and welcome to the Hildebrand Law Firm topic for today. I'm Matt Kaplan.
And I'm Mark Klaus.
Mark is back. He's going to be here for a while, and we're going to talk about something a little bit different today. We typically talk about estate planning and elder law planning and businesses and stuff like that. Today, we're going to talk about Kirsten's favorite subject, alcohol. And so, why are we talking about alcohol? Mark has significant experience dealing with the alcohol industry here in Wisconsin and nationwide and even around the world. And one of the things that I've learned in my many years of experience with alcohol, which I was like 21, yeah, because I started when I was 21, I swear. So for the past 13 years, I've been drinking alcohol and enjoying myself. And alcohol laws in Wisconsin are bizarre. And to the untrained ear or eye, they may make no sense, but hopefully Mark will help clear some things up. So, Mark, you had mentioned something about tiers.
Okay, so let's muddy the water a little bit
Sounds
because
good.
there's been a huge change in the way that Wisconsin decides to regulate the alcohol industry. So as you know, there was something called prohibition that happened, and there was no drinking allowed anywhere. Kind of put yourself back to 30s, 40s era. And then coming out of prohibition, there's something called the three-tiered system. So that meant to protect from a monopolistic system where the brewery has to have separate ownership and control from retail. And while they didn't specifically say so, there was a middle tier of distributors. So it's producer, distributor, retailer. So to get your beer, the brewery makes it, they give it to the wholesaler, who is the guy with all the trucks, and then he gives it to the grocery store, and that's where you buy it from, or whatever area. Those three tiers have to be separated by ownership and control so that there isn't a monopoly that would enable, at the time, the brewery to control everything. They have things called tied houses, so that the bar is tied to the brewery. Well, the last, what are we at, 100 years, 70 years? I'm trying to think mathematically what year we're on. It's been a very long time that system's been in place. And instead of having a national rule, they said, we'll leave it to the states. So each state has its own set of rules and regulations for how it wants to deal with alcohol. And Wisconsin has its very unique way because we are a beer place.
For sure.
We have a lot of German heritage, and we love beer, and we're kind of the flagship for how things ought to work that other states use. But we also, by doing that, it enables control to be more local. So when they pulled back prohibition, the way to get there was to say local control can figure out how to do things.
Okay, that local by the county, by the municipality.
Even tighter, the municipality.
Okay.
But the state can decide how it wants to go. So
Okay.
here, so on a federal level, you have what's called the TTB, we can adjust this. We have the TTB.
Okay.
So the Alcohol Trade and Tobacco Bureau. She knows off the top of my head. I don't. I just call it the TTB. It's like the ATF, but it's just the alcohol part.
Got it.
That's who you. So the TTB will grant will grant a producer the right to produce alcohol, whether it's beer, distilled spirits, wine, or some of these in-between things like mead or cider. It doesn't really fit a category.
Do people actually drink mead that are not like at Renaissance fairs?
Well, someone's got to make it. So, and at what level, right? Like Wisconsin has we're very unique in our old fashions that we make them a different way than they do elsewhere. Brandy old fashions, I think, and they aren't really
the best way, right?
Well, exactly right. So pulling that back, you have your federal rules and you have your state rules. So you'll get your permit from the feds to enable you to make or sell alcohol, and which alcohol in which category. But then the state also has to permit the same So Wisconsin will be the Department of Revenue. So you get all of your licensing from the Department of Revenue in Wisconsin, but to be able to sell it, you go to the local area, and each municipality can decide, how many liquor licenses do we allow in our town? Only some restaurants, some grocery stores, or some convenience centers can only sell certain things at certain times. So Wisconsin allows that level of control. You'll see down south, there's going to be dry counties or dry cities.
Mm-hmm.
So while you can sell alcohol in Louisiana, there may be some city that no beer at all, no soda at all, or only beer if it's under 5%. You can't have higher percent. So this patchwork of local control has created a real crazy web of rules and regulations that you can't just say, well, this is the rule for making beer and we can sell it everywhere. You got to go all the way to that real local level.
Mm-hmm.
So Wisconsin, after maybe 100 and some years, in January decided to throw it out the door. So now we have a whole new scheme where that three-tiered system is being disrupted, and it's opening up the gates for kind of how these things work, adjusting the controls at each level for how you can do things. Some of them, when the microbeers kind of came up in the 80s, they allowed for self-distribution. So you could kind of skip the middle man and do like brewery tours.
Mm-hmm.
And you can sell on premises, direct to customer. You don't have to have the other steps, but only if you made a certain amount of barrels, 300,000 barrels a year or less.
Okay.
They're going to treat the big guys, and then the rules start adjusting in that regard. Well, now they're making, and a lot of folks will come up with a really great recipe, but they won't be able to make it at scale. So
Mm-hmm.
then they'll hire a brewery to make their beer for them. It's called co-packing or contract manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Or you'll want to make it all over the country because it's really expensive to ship a glass bottle full of liquid across the country. It's better off to just make it on the other side of the country. So now you got to have licensing to make beer in California and Florida and Texas. And that's still a whole lot cheaper than making it all in California, shipping it to Texas, because then that one bottle of beer will cost $45.
So then I can imagine that's what a lot of the well-known commercial beer makers do, like Budweiser or Coors. I would presume they don't just make all their stuff in one place and then ship it all over the world.
That's right.
They make it in different parts.
Well, those guys are so big, they can afford their own breweries in their own locations in all the countries and locations they want to be in. But, a smaller micro beer will have its local fam, and then they're going to try and find some fandom in another state. So then they'll go to a place that already has a brewery and say, please make my beer for me. Here's my secret recipe. And they will make that beer exactly the same in that state that they're in. So that's the contract packaging, where one brewery is going to make some other brewery's beer or distilled product or wine. Well, maybe not so much wine, but it happens. So that's allowed. Problem is that relationship has been tricky between the federal rules and the state rules being all different. So Wisconsin just opened that up because on the beer side, it was pretty clear, but when you're making things that aren't beer, like seltzers or other products, it was unclear as to whether that was allowed, because how do you control something if your company is only a recipe? And it's, so where do you fit in the tier?
And seltzers,
you're not a producer.
Yeah.
So then who's actually producing? Because what they really want to do is catch the sales tax and the excise tax from producing it. And who do you get it from?
Well, especially now, seltzers are so hot.
Well, they were,
everyone,
and they aren't. And,
so everyone's making a seltzer.
That's right.
I feel like White Claw still dominates the market, though.
Yeah, that's a classic.
For the most part. But no, I've noticed that especially over the last 10 years, it's not just beer anymore. It's the hard seltzers, it's the hard kombuchas, it's the cocktails in a can and all of that stuff. And
that's right.
And to the consumer, they all seem the same, but it looks like from the actual company level, they seem to all be treated totally differently.
So on the regulation side, that's correct. And on a production side, it's going to depend on how you make that product. So there's going to be a lot of rules for how it's being made, that it's being tracked properly, that a distilled spirit is treated different from a malt spirit or a malt based beverage, and they're taxed differently, and they get transported differently, and they get stored differently. So all those things come into play for a brewery, and it's been quite a trip, and things are always changing. As you know,
Of course.
every time you think you get an understanding of how things are, the rules change, and then you have to adjust to it. So there's been a huge change in Wisconsin for how the rules are changed. They passed a law, but then they didn't make any rules for how to follow through with that law.
Right.
So even though it passed in, it was either January or December, they were supposed to have rules out by May. They don't have rules, so they say generally Wisconsin is going to do it this way, but we're not going to tell you how yet. So right now we are in this figure it out phase, and hopefully there'll be some clear guidance coming from WDOR in the next couple months for how to do that. But they created, I'll say, an alcohol czar, but they haven't picked that person yet. And they have, because that's, well, I mean, that's a gubernatorial appointment, which the Senate is going to have to approve. It's very unique in that it's not a cabinet position. It's the only one that way. And because of how purple our current state government is, it's going to be an interesting slog to get there. So,
I think if there's one thing that's bipartisan here in Wisconsin, it's the love for beer.
That's exactly right. So I hope that for the sake of the industry, these rules will come and clarify, and everyone can continue to get their favorite beverages. The artists in that field can continue to develop new drinks and new products, and we can all benefit from trying something new and fun and get our new favorite drink of the season or whatnot. And that it'll be real clear for the producers and the warehousers and the retailers how to go about getting that great drink into the mouths of those who are trying to enjoy with their families.
Fascinating. I mean, what an incredible topic. It's something that affects a lot of people. And anybody out there, if you're a home brewer and you're looking to get started, every brewery in the state of Wisconsin, at one point, it was some guy with a recipe, and he made it, and he had his friend taste it, and it was terrible. And then he updated the recipe, and it eventually became good. And so, a lot of breweries started as home brewers. So if you are a home brewer, Mark here, if you have any questions for us, give us a call, leave a comment in the video. We'd love to hear from you. Also, to tie this back to estate planning, if you're a home brewer, if you have a small brewery, estate planning is really necessary. You got to make sure you protect your stuff. And so, thank you, Mark. What an interesting conversation. Kind of off the beaten path, but it's always nice to sprinkle in a little fun once in a while and talk about the things that we actually like. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you, I think, to Mark. Thank you, Kirsten, for allowing us to do this and talk about her favorite subject without her being here. I'm just joking. Kirsten doesn't drink, in case you guys all didn't know that. But so we like teasing her about that. But that'll do for the video today. We'll see you next time. And here at Hildebrand Law Firm, we're always here to protect your today and your tomorrow. Thank you.